I was looking at your IMDb, and I want you to tell me a little bit about Chalet Girl, because I know Phil Trail.
And Crazy Rich Asians really reminded me of Chalet Girl when I was watching it. Yeah, I was like, they're kind of the same stories. These
I haven't seen Chalet
outsider
Girl.
women
Apologies.
who then go and kind of find out who they are, but still retain their sense of truthfulness.
What was the first thing that really drew you to On the Basis of Sex?
It was the story. It was a film about this woman, a phenomenal woman who we all know very, very well, and about how Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she didn't like the world as it was, and so she got very angry and decided to change it. And I loved her passion, her determination. I knew it was a great script the moment my agents first mentioned it. I could just tell before even reading it, in fact, just from their excitement. And then I read it really, really quickly in one sitting. It was written by Justice Ginsburg's nephew, who's Daniel Stiepelman. So he had created a really intimate, fun, soulful portrait of this extraordinary woman. So it was kind of a no-brainer.
I mean, when I was watching it, I sort of went through this roller coaster of emotions of really identifying with some of the things that were said to her by like men in her profession, and like you know, when she was up at the Supreme Court and stuff like that. And it's just this. It's like this comfort that the patriarchy has with the fact that they have the power, and then the fact that you, or her character, like, is just as smart, but like is not like thought as much or not respected. I mean, I was very upset during a lot of it because I understood it and I knew it was real, and I knew that not everybody would understand what that feels like.
It's really, no, it's fascinating, fascinating. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, the odds were just against her constantly, and she's constantly in a situation where she's the outsider and she's the other, and they kind of look at her like, "What? Why are you actually here? You know, shouldn't you just be at home in the kitchen? Why do you really? Is it worth it?" And she has to keep fighting back against that constantly, and doing it in a way where she does it on her own terms, and she does it with absolute dignity, and using her brains, changing the system and changing it very carefully and incrementally so it could be more permanent. I think that's what was fascinating about her, is that she took her time and she was patient with it, so that now the laws that she's changed are impossible to go back on. And I think that's one of her greatest achievements.
Yeah.
And why are you here, Miss Ginsburg?
Mrs. Ginsburg, actually. My husband Marty is in the second-year class. I'm at Harvard to learn more about his work, so I can be a more patient and understanding wife.
And what I loved about the movie and your performances, I think sometimes when we hear these stories of people who are kind of iconic or heroic, we just hear the awesome things that they did, like their accomplishments. And what I love what you did with the role is you really saw her journey, that of course there was internal struggle and there was like trying to figure out a way to do this, and there was frustration with people underestimating her. Ultimately, it culminated in her incredible career. But the fact that your performance and that script had so many different like human levels was something that I think we don't get to see a lot for like female protagonists.
Well, I mean, that's what I see so clearly in your work as well, is bringing humanity and bringing a sense of not having all the answers to the character. And that's what I similarly noticed that you do. That's why you're watching Crazy Rich Asians, and I was completely locked into your performance because it is so human. Because I'm with you from the very beginning, and I guess it's hard. How do you describe how you do that. We were saying earlier, it's difficult to explain
The
that,
worst to
that
talk
process.
about acting.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, I'm just this person who has this process. It feels gross.
Yeah,
I wonder, why does it feel gross? Is it because it's so personal?
I think so. I think because it's I guess it's quite an emotional process, so it's quite hard to make it sound logical. Because in some ways, it's a lot happens without you even realizing it. I mean, that's what I see from you. I don't know if that's the case. I mean, there seems like you bring a lot of spontaneity to the moment in front of the camera.
For sure.
And is that something? How do you?
I mean, I definitely do all the actor work process stuff that I don't like to talk about, but I think once I'm there on set, I try to throw all the work away and sort of just trust that it's there so that the scene is in the moment. You know, I'm not like pre-preparing how I'm going to say something, which is, it's hard to do sometimes because, you know, if you're insecure and you're like, you want to do a good job, doing a good job is different than being in the scene.
Totally,
right?
And exactly that. As soon as you're doing a good job, it's awful.
Yeah.
You know, when you're being a good student and you're hitting all your lines perfectly and you're marked and you're doing everything and you're going to get 10 out of 10.
Yay.
Yeah, it's a disaster.
Because it's for somebody else.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not for the character. It's for the approval of the director or like the acting coach or the audience.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. So
it's so interesting.
What do you do? You do the same? Do you throw it away once you like get on set?
Yeah, very, very similar way of approaching it. Very committed to preparation and knowing what you're doing and feeling that you've, in some respects, have a confidence going on to the set, that you feel like, okay, I've done this, I've done my research, I've read about this person, I've done all the homework, so that when you get to set, you can walk on there and you can have a sense of spontaneity, a sense of play, a bit of improvisation, and exactly as you said, you have to throw away the rule book. That is number one.
I think I've read somewhere, it might have been Natalie Portman who said this, or it was Darren Aronofsky, but when she did Black Swan, she was saying the thing that makes like a good ballerina and the struggle that her character is going through in that movie is what I think we're describing, which is a combination of technique and abandon. And if you have too much abandon and too much like freedom, then you won't be able to be consistent. And if you just have technique, it's
boring.
Yeah, it's boring. It's not alive and in the moment. And so like having that balance is something that like I'm always messing up on either side of, but you know, getting closer as I like.
Absolutely.
Do more stuff.
Do you think it's something that as you get more experience, you get better at hitting that magic point between technique and spontaneity?
I think so. I think, and also because we were saying like, work is not as good if you're like, oh, I want to hit these marks and be 100%. I think the larger your body of work is, the less need you feel to get like external validation. And then your work becomes better because then it's just about, you know, the moment between you and like the other actor.
And do you have any sort of, because often it can be quite daunting going onto a set and there's a lot of people and it feels like there's a lot of focus. Do you have certain sort of, I was going to say tricks or techniques or things that you do before you go onto set that kind of help with that feeling at ease?
I mean, I'm on my 50th year of a TV show. So now I'm very at ease with it because we've done 100 episodes. And so I don't get as nervous. But like the first couple seasons, I used to go loosey-goosey, like before I started a take, because sometimes I didn't. I'm like, and I just like get loose and just like be in the ground. Yeah. But I don't have to loosey-goose anymore.
But it's losing the self-consciousness, isn't it? Yeah, whatever it takes.
You do?
It's very much. I like to put loud music on before I go onto set and dance around and do silly shapes and silly faces and things
fun.
like that. Yeah, very, very similar.
That's better than loosey-goosey.
Well, no, it's the same. It's the same approach. Yeah. Interestingly, it's trying not to. I think a lot of it's trying not to overthink it as well.
Getting that abandon.
Yeah. Letting it go somehow.
This is Rachel Chu.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to meet you, Mrs. Young. Or Auntie, right? I'm learning the lingo.
I'm very glad to finally meet you too. Nick tells me you're a professor too. What do you teach?
I teach economics.
And she's brilliant.
So watching Crazy Rich Asians, I can see why it has been such a phenomenal success. It is full of such life and love and hope, and I just wondered how has it been? Has it been in terms of that experience, obviously being in something that has such huge affection and has been so well received? Has it? I mean, that's quite a wide question.
Yeah, no, thank you. First of all, I mean, my emotions have sort of run the gamut. I mean, there was a lot of like anticipation behind it, and it's the first. Not only is it the first movie I'm the lead of, but this was my first studio movie, like ever. Like even as like I didn't have a supporting role in anything else.
Yeah,
so it's a lot of pressure, but also I think even the fact that it existed, even I do think it's a good movie, but even if it hadn't been like as great as it turned out, I think the fact that a studio decided to make it, to invest in a story from creators of color who didn't necessarily have a track record of box office success, not because they aren't a viable box office success, but because there was no data to like show that we had that. So the fact that it was made and was made with the people who understood the experience, with the actors who knew the experience, director, writers, I think that gave it an authenticity that Asian American audiences really responded to, because we don't have representation, and then I think just other people who are not Asian Americans still respond to it because it's very much about being seen for who you are.
Exactly.
And we all have that kind of thing. You want to be understood. You want to be valued.
Yeah, and it should have happened centuries ago.
Yeah.
But thank goodness it's happened now.
I mean, St. Ruth Bader Ginsburg,
Yeah.
I mean, should have been happening a long time ago.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I guess it's good that it is a moment of change, and it does feel that the landscape's just getting so much more interesting. That this patriarchal attitude towards filmmaking is breaking down.
Have you felt any kind of yes, we're in this like moment with Time's Up and Me Too and like female empowerment. Have you felt any increased pushback from the patriarchy? Because I have.
In what sense?
Well, I feel like sometimes I'm talking to men in the industry who, of course, they understand intellectually that it's good to support women and that it's makes for a better story, all that kind of stuff. But there's kind of a begrudging. How do I describe? I was with a white male actor the other day, and he was like, "It's a hard time in Hollywood for white male actors." And you know what, though? I heard him. I was like, actually, because he's older, and I was like, it probably is in context of what you're accustomed to. But what you're feeling right now is sort of what women and
everyone
actors
else has been feeling
of color
for,
the whole time.
Yeah.
And so there's that great quote that I forgot who said it, but he said, when you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like deprivation.
Yeah.
And so I think
it's the balance. It's the balance.
Yeah.
Being
so I think
necessary.
That's the pushback because it's like, oh, I want to support, but it feels like deprivation because I have to, cede some of these roles, some of this power a little bit. So
that's so perfectly put. And I think also there's fear. There's always fear when there's any change and any shift, and people tend to freeze up in the face of that.
For sure.
And I think ultimately it is about everyone working together. Is that there is a particularly, and that's what's been so exciting with the revolution in technology as well, with television, with there being so many platforms, that there are room for so many stories.
Yeah, and then the stories have to be better because it's a more competitive environment. They have to be different, they have to be interesting. So it's good for everyone, but it might be threatening for somebody who had it easy before.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, but this is the new way.
Yeah, but I'm always trying to think like from the other perspective. And I could understand why it's threatening, because if you live in a society where you are valued for your power, when you feel it go away, you can start to question your self-worth. I mean, same thing with being a woman in Hollywood. Like, if you're valued for being beautiful or being youthful, and then like you start to get older, and then people like treat you or value you differently, it doesn't mean that you're a different person, but to say that your external environment has no effect on yourself would be foolish.
It's huge, but it feels as though it's about breaking down all of those outmoded conceptions of how people should be. And that's interestingly something I do feel there is enormous pressure on women I'm still feeling it in terms of how they look, and that it would be great to see that start to dissipate and that pressure to just come off. And that I feel we're still, and particularly with older actresses, there is far too much ageism and too much focus on female appearance. And I think that would be, continuing on from Me Too, that would be fantastic to see some of that pressure shift.
I mean, I've had conversations where I'm like, well, people like are focused on appearance and how this woman looks too much, and they're like, well, what else would you talk about? Like, it doesn't even occur to them, and I'm like, well, somebody's actions, perhaps like their intellect, and they're like, oh, right, those are things that matter.
And I think, interestingly, technology is sort of allowing different voices to come through. It is allowing women to have different conversations, in the sense that there is an ownership of how you're put out into the world much more now, with someone like Reese Witherspoon and having Instagram, and that you can control how you're seen, which is actually a really positive thing to have come from technological shift. Is it does feel, and obviously actors being producers, and it does feel that sort of 1950s outmoded way of the studio having ultimate control. It is definitely is changing. I don't know if you sort of feel similarly.
Have you ever had any? I had a cheesy manager once who was like, honey, they don't call it show art, they call it show business. And I was just like, oh my God. And my answer to that is like, without my art, you ain't got no business, you know?
Very.
So it's like, but I get it. Like, you have to like understand, economics is a part of our world. It's like a way we value things. But it's like, don't use that bottom line argument to try to suppress artistic meaning. Of course, I hate talking about artistic meaning, because it's like, it's again that acting thing. You don't want to talk about your thing, your process.
But it is. But it's ideally, it's a fusion of the two. Is that with a film like Crazy Rich Asians, it's a fusion of quality and reaching a lot of people. I mean, I always feel there's no reason that a film can't be good, but millions of people want to see it. Exactly.
But it's also because criticism these days, like the critics, is primarily male. So it's like seen from a male point of view. I mean, there's a reason why we have this term chick flicks or chick lit. Why we don't have like dude movies? No, they're just movies.
Only a fool folds a winning hand.
There's no winning. You made sure of that. Because if Nick chose me, he would lose his family. And if he chose his family, he might spend the rest of his life resenting you.
There's a great example of how men might feel threatened. Because recently I was a juror for a film festival, and we were deciding who was going to win Best Actor, right? And so we had this deliberation call. And it was interesting because the jury was split. Well, there were 5 jurors. 2 were men, 2 were women. 1 didn't show up, so I actually.
They were busy. I
know, but we were very split among gender lines. Like, me and the other woman were like, this performance, like, without a doubt. And then the 2 men were like, no, this performance, without a doubt. And me and the woman were sort of making arguments and like talking about like the arc of the character and what the actor did. And they were just like, no, our rule is kind of law. And then I pointed out the gender difference, and I was like, maybe this is because the role that you think, or the actor that you think should get it is like this intense, like deep, dark, masculine type of role. And what I look for is an actor who has both depth and levity, because I think when you just have that depth, it could be really indulgent and self-congratulatory. And whereas the one that me and the woman thought was the best was a man, but like he had to really reach into his vulnerability, like a lot, which is, I think, really brave for men to have to do. But they didn't. Well, it wasn't attractive to the male jurors.
And that's why we need, I mean, it's we need 50-50 in male and female critics.
Totally.
I mean, and that has to change instantly, because it, as you say, it brings a totally different perspective onto a film.
Yeah.
And it feels deeply unfair that it's so one-sided.
But they don't, people don't always see that, because at one point I was like, I said to one of the jurors, wasn't the nicest thing, I was like, oh my God, that's such a male point of view. Think about the other thing. He was like, well, it's the first time I've ever been accused of being a male before. And I'm like, welcome to my world every single day, where like something that I value is taken a couple notches down because it's from the female perspective, which has not been the critical perspective of like the institutions, whether it's movies or books or whatever.
Well, the male view has always been the view, and that is what is shifting. Is it's no, actually we all live here together, so it's going to be shared views.
And people feel threatened by it, but it's only going to make you better. Like more knowledge doesn't make people worse. So I just don't. The pushback is something that kind of frustrates me.
Yeah, but I think that is always the case with any revolution. There's always a time of great sort of bloodshed in a way, in order for there to be change. People have to adapt, and it does seem that the way forward is that we have to encourage more women at young ages to go into being film critics, television critics. To go. I mean, what we're seeing, what was great with the recent elections was the number of women who are now in positions of responsibility.
Oh my God, it's great.
And that is how we will affect change. We need to be very much in those top level positions.
Did you get to meet Ruth Bader Ginsburg?
I did, yes, I did.
What was that like? And how did it feel to play somebody who's so iconic and like still alive?
Well, it's really nerve-wracking. It's I mean, when you meet her, you sort of you want to take a bow.
Yeah.
You have this moment of just immense respect.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating.
Gratitude.
Yeah, when we were shooting right at the end of the film, she's in the film coming up the the steps.
Tears.
I
was dying.
Yeah, such a special moment. And it was fascinating. She was waiting to go onto set, and she was sitting very carefully, and people it was fascinating to watch people coming up and sort of paying their respects to her. And she has this, she is a queen, you know, she has a tremendous sort of quietness with which she holds herself, and a dignity, and she's someone who has earned her position. And that's how you gain respect. You know, she is there because she earned it and worked very, very hard for it. But it was pretty incredible. Yeah, pretty extraordinary woman to play.
I know.
Definitely.
Wow.
Then I want you to walk me home, Marty, so I can sit in my corner and write a lesson plan to inspire the next generation of students to go forth and fight for equality.
I don't understand why you're acting like that's such a bad thing. You're out there training the next generation of lawyers to change the world.
Because that's what I wanted to do.
I wonder how you found it dealing with fans and dealing with sort of the attention that comes with your job. Is it something that you enjoy, how do you process that? How do you?
It's changed for me over time. When I first started, having more visibility, there was a part of me that like didn't want to own it. Like when somebody came up to me and was like, "Oh my God, I love your voice representation." I wanted to say like, "I'm not special. Like you are just as special." Don't worship me, because worship culture is sort of a lot of, the problem, right? Is that we value people differently.
We put people on pedestals, yeah.
But then, you know, the more I've gone through this, I'm like, you should just be graceful with people who come up to you and just remember how it felt when you were like a kid in Virginia and you thought that like Sandra Bullock was like the coolest in the world. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's part of everybody's process. And so I've become better at it, but I was uncomfortable with it at first. I didn't like the attention. What about you?
Well, no, that's so true. I don't mean to name drop, but I saw Matt Damon at this screening, and he came out the door. I've never met him in my life, and I was like, "Hey, how are you?" And he just looked at me like, "Who the hell are you?" You know. But it was exactly that.
But you
and
said, "Hey."
Yeah, but it was because you spent so many years watching this person, and he's so relatable to on screen that I was just like, I felt like I knew him. I've never met him in my life.
But I love that you did that, because I get scared. Like, I'm like, oh, they won't know who I am. There's like this weird thing where I'm like trying to hide away.
But it was so instinctive. That's why I was so embarrassed.
Because
I was
that you
just
grow
like,
up with
shit.
them, like in your like TVs and like your movie screens.
Yeah, but that's what. But it is. But as you were saying, it's so important to have that empathy. And it's
just to not take it so seriously.
Yeah,
just be like, this is a part of the job that is.
And it's really lovely that people, you know, go and see your work.
For sure.
I mean that's
And culture does affect policy, and policy makes change.
Absolutely.
Sometimes
change people's hearts and then change minds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there was this study said about this TV show Will and Grace. I don't know if you get it in the UK.
Yeah.
But like before Will and Grace started, there was like a poll of how people felt about same-sex marriage. And then by the time Will and Grace was over, like people, like the percentages that had shifted so drastically just because you got to see, you know, a homosexual couple humanized on screen, which, you know, if you live like somewhere where, you know, there isn't a lot of, there isn't a gay population, you don't really know it. And so I think having a show like that and having a movie like yours with a woman in power, a movie like mine,
yours,
with Asian American story,
it changes people's perspectives.
Yeah, for the better.
And does it while, you know, having fun and eating popcorn, which is actually one of the most powerful ways of influencing people and making people more, as you say, more accepting.
Yeah. It's like it's
you sort of come round the side, round the back.
Yeah. Sneak up on them.
Yeah, exactly.
The red vines.
Yeah. And is it sort of in terms of where do you sort of have an idea of what you want to do next, or is it something that's quite, you kind of see what comes, or do you have quite a clear
Oh, I know what
plan?
I want to do.
Yeah.
I just immediately, like, I really want to do a musical because I love to sing.
Yeah, you were saying that you sing.
So that's what I immediately want to do.
That would be brilliant.
I know, it's so fun.
You got to produce it.
Oh my gosh, I don't know. I'm so like, people are like, are you going to ever produce or direct? And I'm like, this brain doesn't handle more than one thing at a time. Like
I don't believe that.
I don't think I could do it. I did direct actually once. I directed this little short film that I wrote. I didn't star in it, but I just directed it. I cried every day on set because I got too overwhelmed. Too many people like, oh.
Answering a lot of questions.
I couldn't do it.
Yeah, that's what director friend of mine was saying. He was like, you answer a lot of questions all day, and you have to seem like you know what you're doing.
Well, this is why our mutual friend Phil is so great, because like you have to have this calm presence because you're the captain of the ship, and if you're crying on set like I was, you know, it doesn't help the security of other departments, and it's such like a collaborative thing.
Yeah, it does. It needs quite clear leadership, doesn't it? Because everyone is looking to that person.
Yeah.
But I think I don't know. I feel you'd be very good at it. I think there's a way of doing it that I think you can do it on your own terms. I think, you know, maybe that was the right thing to do, to be emotionally engaged.
That's true. Yeah. Maybe the idea that a director should not cry is a male perspective.
It's to bring down the patriarchy.
Just cry every day.
Yeah, exactly.
Go on that set.
Perfect.
Why did you put that light there?
Yeah,
just like freak out.
Let's do it.
I don't know. I don't know if I'm ready for that. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe in a few years.
Well, it's building up. It's sort of building up. experience, I guess, isn't it? But I think the key is, I always, when people say, you know, want to get into acting and they ask about it, I do feel, first of all, just do it. Just join a local group, theatre group, and get involved.
You learn by doing.
But also produce, write, be in control of the content. Because in that way, then you're not waiting for other people to give you a job.
Yeah, and these days you can do it because of all the different platforms that we have. I mean, you could shoot a movie on an iPhone. Did you see Tangerine?
What's that?
Did you see the movie Tangerine?
No, I haven't.
It's like shot on iPhone.
Oh,
it's so good. It's really fun. You should see it.
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of, anyone can pick up a camera now. There's no kind of barriers to entry, which is pretty exciting.
And what's happening
Where do we start?
Politically, I mean, especially on the Supreme Court, is exactly what I think I was saying before about the pushback, the threat of like losing power.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's like
it's a crumbling patriarchy.
It's the death rattle.
It's the
death
throes. Exactly.
Grasp
exactly.
Of like
so you're
desperation,
hanging on even more. Yeah, and that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, for sure. Which is, you know, from an actor's perspective, like I want to empathize with how it must feel to lose that. But then, like on a personal and a global perspective, it's also, I think, really good for that to happen. But it's going to be, I think, was Ruth Bader Ginsburg the one who said, like, somebody was like, when will there be equality in the Supreme Court? And when she was the one, she said, when all the judges are
all 9
female.
Are female.
And people are like, no, that's crazy. And she's like, you didn't say it was crazy when it was all men.
Exactly.
Like, it shouldn't be a story. That's when it'll be, like, normalized.
Yeah.
Like,
then we'll be happy.
Yeah, when's that going to happen?
Well, it's. I mean,
a couple of years.
Let's hope. Yeah, let's hope it is shifting. I mean, I think we're in these times. It feels it's very similar in what's happening in Britain. There are these growing. It feels generational divides and geographical divides, and somehow we need to find a place of finding a greater unity, but that unity is going to come with a fight. It feels that we have to fight for that equality.
I think it's even because we kind of in a way speak different languages from like older generations and younger generations.
Well, that's what seems to be happening.
With technology and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I think older generations feel very isolated. They feel because they're not at home with technology, they then get scared, and then with that fear, they seem to become very conservative.
Yeah, they want to like have clearly defined, literally borders, not just with countries, but like this is a man and this is a woman because all this new content is too overwhelming.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
And you know, I empathize with that. But
they feel incredibly isolated.
Yeah, and then like it doesn't help when like, you know, liberal, progressive young people insult somebody who might be just going through this fear-based bias, which of course isn't good, and I don't think that you should like support that. But I think that progress doesn't come with finger pointing. It comes with taking your ego out of it, not trying to be right, and just understanding a person without judgment.
And it feels as though that comes from communication, and it comes from, you know, as Oprah was doing with sort of grassroots politics, that there has to be face-to-face interaction with people. And I think that's how people will understand people who are different from themselves.
Yeah, because if you're just looking at pictures on the internet, the Facebook feed, it's not, I mean, half of it isn't even real.
You get further removed. Yeah. Somehow it's bringing people together in a more human way. How would you feel about being in part of the Star Wars universe? Because we would love to have you.
Oh, thank you. I probably wouldn't be into it, not because I don't love the films and think they're great, but with those movies, I feel like you have to be stuck in like a long contract, and I want to take roles that challenge me in different ways, like every year. And having been on a TV show for 5 years, which I love.
You're ready for something new.
I'm ready for something new, and so thinking about that makes me feel like it's golden shackles or something like that. But Did you have to do that with yours?
Well,
like sign a 3-picture deal or something?
I was very fortunate in some respects that it was a one-off. So we very much explored that, but I loved playing that character. So I actually, in an opposite way, I'd really like to have a little more consistency and come back and bring Jin back. Yeah, I would actually, I'd actually like that for a couple of years, just to have a little bit of that stability.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I was doing Crazy Rich Asians press, and it was my first press junket tour, and it was also overwhelming. Right after that, or during that, I went back to my show, and it was just such a comfort to be in a soundstage I knew, with a crew I knew, actors I knew, something that was familiar. So there's something lovely about that too. So maybe Star Wars could be my new fresh off the boat. I don't know.
I guess, is there going to be is the question on everyone's lips, is there going to be a Crazy Rich Asians 2?
I don't know.
Watch this space. Rogue 2 and Crazy Rich Asians 2.
People ask me that, but I mean, maybe they're having conversations about it now, but I'm kind of not privy to those.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
we'll see. I'm in it.
I can see that happening.
If
Yeah.
it happens, so I'm there.